Now, you probably already knew this, but the rest of the world likes to do its business in dollars. Now, this includes when India buys a TV from Japan or when Russia sends caviar to Europe. And the reason why is because it's just simpler and safer to conduct all your transactions in one currency, the US dollar. I mean, think about it. If you're a country that does 100 deals a day with 100 different countries, can you imagine if you had to look up the transaction rates before every single deal? And then have to wonder whether or not you should hold off for a few days since the peso just took a slight hit compared to the ruble. It's like if you're playing Monopoly, but instead of everyone just using Monopoly money, one person is using subway tokens and someone else is using raffle tickets, and the last person only has a few bits of yarn. And that's why most international transactions are done in US dollar. And that's why the dollar makes up 62% of the global currency reserve. And there's one big winner in all of this, the printing company of that currency, the United States of America. Hi, this is Joseph Zhang. I'm the managing partner here at Zhang & Associates, where we solve legal problems with creative solutions. And this brings us to the first competitive edge of the dollar. US companies can access dollars easier than everyone else. Other companies and individuals have to have their own country's currency as well as the dollar to do business. And when they run out of dollars, they have to go get more. US companies can just hold dollars without having to worry about the expensive exchange rate. And in the event that they do need more cash, it's far easier for them to get dollars than a foreign company that is not based in the US. And so that's as if every time we pass go, we get to collect $300 as opposed to $200. And that's the advantage we're talking about. Now, the second competitive advantage is far scarier because it gives the United States of America economic sanctioning power against other countries that it disagrees with. Let me explain. So a few years back, it came out that a French bank was facilitating transactions between Sudan, Iran, and Cuba. All countries that the US pretty much blacklisted for now. But once the US found out about this, not only did the bank have to pay a $9 billion penalty, but 13 of its executives had to resign directly because of the actions taken by the US Justice Department and the Federal Reserve. So you might ask, why did a fancy French bank have to comply with American foreign policy? Well, because it has no choice. Banks simply can't risk jeopardizing their access to the global financial network that the US controls. Basically, the US government is saying to the rest of the world and to all the companies, if you trade with somebody that we do not approve of, then you will no longer have access to the super efficient dollar that is so easy to trade with. It's like Tommy, who owns the Monopoly game. If we don't listen to their rules, then we have to create our own board game, and that's just a pain. And if that's not enough already, the US still has a third competitive advantage in this giant game of international monopoly. And what we're talking about is currency manipulation. Specifically, that the US will engage in manipulating its own currency. You see, some countries don't want their currency value to go up because essentially that makes everything in their country more expensive and everyone would stop pouring money there. And the prime example of this is China. Because the currency value is so low, it's cheap, and so we keep on investing in that country to manufacture goods. On the other hand, some countries don't want their currency value to go down since they're not as reliant on foreign investments. For them, a weaker currency would just mean less purchasing power. It's as if their bank account just got reduced by half. And the prime example of this is Luxembourg, where 80% of their GDP is reliant on the service sector. So if the currency got reduced, it's as if their paycheck got reduced. But when it comes to the US, we don't have this restriction of wanting our currency to go one way or the other. The US is big enough that it benefits either way. If the dollar becomes stronger, then we just gain a lot of purchasing power. If it becomes weaker, well then a whole bunch of investment would just pour back into the US. Because you might not know this, but the US is actually the second biggest manufacturing nation in the world. So what does it mean when other countries are dependent on their currency to be high or low, and the US can have it both ways? Well, that makes it so that other countries are vulnerable to the US manipulating its own currency. For example, the US owes China over $1 trillion. If we let our dollar sink in relation to the RMB, then we effectively cut our debt in half, and they might just have lost $500 billion. So what do if you are in another country fed up with the US bullying? You don't want to be reliant on the dollar for trades. You don't want the threat of US sanctions or the threat of US manipulating its currency to harm you. What do? Well, you can create your own financial system to do trades, right? You don't have to use the dollar. You can create your own board game, so to speak. But when you pull out of this financial system, it's not really going to harm the United States generally. And for you to engage in trade with anybody else, you have to provide a pretty good incentive for somebody else to trade with you on your own terms. We see a small scale of this with Amazon. As a company, you could just have your own website and list your product there with its own shipping and handling and your own delivery times. But if you want to access more users, you have to go through Amazon. So if you want to trade with everybody else in the world, you almost have to be plugged in to this system. And if you have your own website or your own trade agreements built up, you kind of have to give like a 20% discount or something to other countries and other companies. And that is going to come at a great cost. And that's the competitive advantage of the US dollar. It is sort of irreplaceable, the dominant currency that the world uses. It's the safest investment in times that are hard, like now with a pandemic. The dollar has only increased in value. And if you've ever felt job insecurity, just know that people in other countries not only have job insecurity, but they also have currency insecurity, because who knows when their currency might depreciate. And I know the threat of currency depreciation firsthand. When I was young, I had to travel to England frequently, and the exchange rate was £1 for $2. You couldn't buy a decent sandwich unless you spend over $40. It's extremely expensive. But just last year, with Brexit raging on, the exchange rate almost went from $1 to £1. And the cost of a meal in London actually was cheaper than some places in LA. And that's what I mean when I say you might be a lot richer than you think. One of my currency trading clients told me that owning dollars is like owning lottery tickets that don't expire. At any given moment, that dollar might just be worth a lot more than you think. A day will come, much like any other day. But on that day and in that moment, an opportunity of a lifetime will present itself to you. May you have the wisdom to discern what moment that is and have the courage to execute on that discernment. And a quick disclaimer, I'm not advocating for currency trading or giving investment advice. Thank you for watching today's video. This is episode 5 of this new series, Let's Talk America. If you like what you see, please smash that like button and subscribe. We're releasing 2 new videos every week following up to the election. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.